And joining us right now on the Rothman Orthopedics guest line, our good friend from the USA Today Sixers Wire. You can also catch him just managing like a boss, ladies and gentlemen. Regional NBA Wire editor as well. No big deal. Our friend Ky Carlin joins us. What's going on there, Ky?
What's going on, Mark? Thanks for the intro. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. You do a great job covering the Sixers. Of course, we've had you on the show before. It's great to have you on again. And it's crazy. It's one of these things, like I was thinking, I haven't talked to Ky in a while. And I love talking to you last year during the season. And then the Eagles season ran forever. And then the Phillies, of course, were picking up and just everything, went on here. But we pick up here at a very interesting time for the Sixers. And I know my audience is probably tired of me saying this, but we've watched in the last couple months, we've watched the Phillies lose the World Series. We've watched the Eagles lose the Super Bowl. And it is still bothering me more that the Sixers got bounced out again in a Game 7 of the second round of the playoffs. And, of course, again, against the Boston Celtics. Where are you as far as, where you think the fan base is? What are you hearing? What are people asking you on social media when it comes to just their overall reaction from that Game 7 loss?
I mean, look, listen, I know a lot of people are upset, and rightfully so. I think the crazy thing is, though, Mark, everybody was talking about Nikola Jokic failing, in the postseason, and now Jokic is in the NBA Finals. Well, Joel Embiid is bounced in the second round for the 5th time in 6 seasons of his career. It's life is cruel. Life is unfair. So listen, so here's my final thoughts on this year's team. First of all, the loss was predictable. I had them losing round 2 literally from October. I thought PJ Tucker was going to make a difference. I do think he did make a difference. I think we all saw it in Game 4 of the Celtics series when Tucker was in Joel's ear saying, "Hey man, get going. We need you." And Sixers ended up winning that game in overtime. So I feel like he did make a difference, Mark. The thing is, though, in Game 7, you need your stars to step up. And how many times have we seen James Harden kind of come up short in a Game 7? Now, not just with Philadelphia, but with the Houston Rockets as well. How many times have we seen James come up short in these situations? The same goes for Joel. Listen, if it wasn't for Ben Simmons passing up to Matisse Thybulle in Game 7 against Atlanta, we would all be talking about Joel having 8 turnovers in that Game 7 against Atlanta. Joel kind of escaped that blame because what Ben did was absolutely insane.
Yeah, we'd be talking about that, and we'd be talking about Doc Rivers' lack of adjustments more, and we'd barely be talking about Ben Simmons.
Yeah, right. But Ben Simmons passing up that dunk absolved a lot of people of blame. It really did. And then you look at this Game 7 against Boston. Mark and Joel, she was 5 for 18. So it's just these guys continue to kind of come up short. And I know it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way that he was kind of laughing and joking around with Jason Tatum after the game. I know that kind of rubbed people the wrong way. So they're kind of in a bad spot right now.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm with you there. So that was then, and it's still sticking with me now, unfortunately. But I know, Ky, that a lot of people are going to be busy over this weekend, and I want to kind of fast forward to Tuesday. People are going to be back at work. People are going to be back in the office. They're going to be on their Zoom calls, of course, and the coaching search is heating up around the NBA, and it looks like the Phoenix Suns are looking at Nick Nurse a lot closer, looking at Doc Rivers, of course, which is not happening here, as we all know. There's a bunch of names that are floating out there. Mike Budenholzer right now. Do you think the Sixers do you think they'll have a coach by Tuesday? They interview Vogel, obviously. What do you think the future, the near future, holds for us come Tuesday when it comes to the coaching search around the NBA?
Now, see, I don't think anything changes just yet by Tuesday. I really just I think, in my opinion, this isn't sourced or anything. In my opinion, I think this all kind of comes down to whatever read they get on James Harden. You know what I mean? I feel like they want to situate the James stuff first, which obviously puts him in a bad spot because free agency obviously doesn't start till June 30th. But I feel like whatever coach that they hire will kind of depend on him, which is why I wouldn't count out Mike D'Antoni. And again, this is just an opinion, but it's why I wouldn't count out Mike D'Antoni. It's why I think if they hire D'Antoni, then James will be like, oh yeah, I'm staying here. Yeah, I got Daryl here. I got PJ here. I know I got business ventures in Houston. I got my mom in Houston. You know what? Come to Philly. We'll figure this thing out. I do feel like if Mike D'Antoni gets hired, I feel like that is the tell-all that James will stay. In my opinion, though, Mark, Nick Nurse should be the guy. Nurse should be the guy they hire. Like I think he's a brilliant tactician. He thinks outside the box, and his teams in Toronto were like the top defensive teams in the league or near the top like every year. So I would go with Nurse for sure.
I'm with you there as far as Nurse goes, and let's focus on that for a second here. Do you think Nurse would focus on the 76ers?
What do you mean?
Would he want this job? Would Harden or no Harden, Joel Embiid at the status that he's at right now, would Nurse want to be in Philadelphia?
I think he would. I mean, listen, even if James leaves, Mark, you still have Joel Embiid under contract. They'll probably extend Tyrese Maxey. He's eligible for an extension this summer. You'll only have one more year of Tobias Harris, and then his money kind of clears off, and then you can kind of reload and things like that. And then you've also got a proven veteran in PJ Tucker. So I do feel like even if Harden does leave, the Sixers are still an attractable destination just because they have so much talent, starting with the MVP of the league. So, I look at the Sixers job, and if I was a coach, James Harden or no James Harden, I'm looking at Philadelphia, and I'm like, that's an attractable destination.
If you're betting on a coach to wind up in Philadelphia, do you think it is Nick Nurse, or do you think somebody else? You mentioned Mike D'Antoni as well, but is there anyone else you think is the favorite to land the job here in Philly?
I really don't think so. Like for me, it kind of comes down to Nurse. And I know, and I'll be honest with you, I know a lot of people want Monty Williams, but for me, I think Monty Williams takes a year off. Like there's just some kind of things I've been seeing floating around Twitter that maybe Monty Williams is just going to take a year off. I mean, Phoenix this year has been it's been a crazy situation with the Robert Sarver stuff, the big Kevin Durant trade, all the injuries up and down the roster. And so that was probably a year where for Monty, where it was just like, I'm sure he would still love to be coaching the Suns, but I'm sure being fired wasn't the worst thing in the world for him because maybe he'd like to take a year off, just breathe a little bit. So maybe Monty Williams isn't a guy who's looking to get into coaching right away. Mike Budenholzer as well. I don't think Budenholzer is going to get into coaching as well right off the bat. I think he's another guy who's going to take a year off. So for me, it comes down to Nick Nurse, Mike D'Antoni, Frank Vogel, obviously, and I wouldn't count out Sam Cassell.
Okay, now how much of Doc Rivers is in Sam Cassell in terms of what kind of coach you think Sam Cassell would be if he were to get the job?
I'm not sure. Like that's the big question, right? Because he was Doc's assistant for 9 years, the 6 with the Los Angeles Clippers and the 3 here in Philadelphia. So Sam Cassell has been pretty much an extension of Rivers for the past decade, really. So it'd be interesting to if the Sixers factor that into things. I do know Sam has worked so closely with Tyrese Maxey, so closely with James Harden, and I know he's very likable or very well liked among that roster. So I feel like Cassell will be a guy who the Sixers hire him. That could maybe factor into the James situation as well. So yeah, like that, there's a lot going on there.
So the D'Antoni thing, let's focus on this for a second. Mike D'Antoni obviously was in Houston with James Harden. They know each other well. They weren't able to get to the promised land, as everybody knows. So why would it work here in Philadelphia? And if you're Joel Embiid, when do you start looking around and going, okay, wait, when did this become the Houston Rockets retirement center? Like, what the hell's going on here? So why would Joel Embiid also be for that? So 2 questions. One, would it work? And why would JoJo go for it?
For me, I don't think it would work.
Okay.
Like that. Like that's the thing. And,
I agree. It doesn't work. Yeah.
And, I think it was Alan Hahn, ESPN's Alan Hahn. He was on First Take. And I think they were talking about the Harden Embiid dynamic and possible new head coach and things like that. And even Alan Hahn was like, who are the Sixers committing to? Are they committed to Joel Embiid or are they committed to James Harden? Because it's beginning to look like it's James Harden. And it makes a lot of sense. They brought in like 3 or 4 former Rockets in the offseason. Tucker, Montrezl Harrell, Daniel House, even D'Anthony Melton, who obviously didn't play for the Rockets, but he was drafted by the Rockets, and Daryl Morey. All of them have some type of connection to Morey and the Rockets. And it's kind of just like, Daryl, if it didn't work in Houston, why are you bringing it to Philadelphia? So in my opinion, I don't think it's going to work. But Daryl has also done a really good job of putting the right pieces around Joe. I think that's something that we do have to give him credit for, because when he took over the job in 2020, moving out Horford, Josh Richardson, bringing in shooters, Danny Green, Seth Curry immediately. The next year, the Ben Simmons saga moves that and gets a future Hall of Famer in James Harden. Then this past offseason, he brings in toughness. It's just obviously it has the weird Rocket connection, though. So that's the big question. And would Joel go for it? I think he would, just because D'Antoni was an assistant under Brett Brown in, I think, 2015-16. That was Joel's technically second year in the league. I put that in quotations because that was the second year he was hurt from the injuries. So, but I knew Joel and D'Antoni actually had a little bit of some type of like positive relationship when MDA was here. So I think Joel would go for it. I just personally don't think it would work because this is essentially the same type of core. Well, not exactly. I mean, Joel's obviously better than Clint Capella, but this is kind of like the same idea of you tried to do in Houston and it didn't work. You came up short. Now these guys are 5 years older, 4 or 5 years older. And in Philadelphia, I'm not sure. I don't think it'll work.
I'm with you 100%. I don't like it. That's why I want to do something different. Even Frank Vogel ahead of Mike D'Antoni, as far as I'm concerned there. So this is an interesting thing because you look at the free agent class and there's no like huge sexy name that's out there right now that could come in here and either replace James Harden and make this team closer to a championship. Really nobody that you can have a lot of confidence in. So are we staring into the abyss? Like I think we are. I think we're staring into this abyss of, we're looking at best another second round exit next year. And then hopefully you can rebuild after that. What do you just think right now as far as the immediate future goes for the 76ers in terms of what type of team they'll be? Is it going to be the Maxey and Embiid show and then Tobias Harris as well? Or do you see somebody else coming here and in here and helping out on the court as well?
Here's the thing, though. I feel like it has to be the Maxey and Joel show and then a little bit of Tobias or whatever he gives you. But the big thing is, though, you just mentioned it, this team's ceiling is kind of the second round. Like, this is it. Like, they're not – I think they can win. I think they can because we were saying the same things about the Denver Nuggets the past 3-4 years, and now the Nuggets are in the NBA Finals. So and they took out some really good players: Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, even round one, Karl Towns, Anthony Edwards, all-stars, superstars, combination of this league. So they took out some really good players. The thing with Philadelphia is Joel is 29, but with all the injuries he sustained, you know, one bad fall and it could be a wrap, which is unfortunate because like he's such a great dude and he's a great talent, obviously. But when you look at the Sixers right now, it's just kind of like you're kind of very close to hitting that reset button. You really are. You're very close to it, especially if James leaves in this offseason, because if he does, you're rocking with Joel, Tyrese, Tobias is over here. You're going to have a 38-year-old PJ Tucker who will turn 39 in the playoffs. And it's like, is that beating the Milwaukee Bucks? And speaking of the Bucks, I know they just lost round one to the Miami Heat. They're probably going to come back with a vengeance next year and probably be like, yo, this year was just a fluke. You can't forget about us. And then is that going to beat the Boston Celtics? Is that going to beat the Miami Heat even? So, or even the Cleveland Cavaliers. I know they just flamed out round one, but they're young. They're only going to get better. So I look at the Sixers, man, and they are kind of in a really, really bad spot.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. Unfortunately, I'm a guy who grew up here and rooted for this team. Obviously, still do. But when it comes to Embiid, you mentioned it. He's going to be 30 years old. It's not a young 30 years old by any means, by any stretch of the imagination, because of all the injuries that he has sustained. So when you talk about a reset button, how close are you, even in this offseason, by potentially just blowing it all up and starting another version of the process again?
For me, it kind of depends on Harden. Because look, if you bring Harden back, like if he does decide to come back, you still have a really, really good team. And like they'll still win 52 to 55 games. And then at that point, you got to hope and pray that Joel actually has a healthy playoff run, because every year, unfortunately, the guy just has some type of injury. So, but if you have a healthy Joel for a playoff run, then who knows the possibilities of what could happen? We've never seen it. So I feel like that is obviously a big factor in when you press that reset button. Because if James Harden comes back, Mark, they're still a really, really good team. And then at that point, you got to figure out the bench, because George Niang's a free agent, Jalen McDaniels is a free agent, Shake Milton's a free agent, Paul Reed's a free agent. So you got to kind of figure out how you're going to fortify your bench unit a little bit, and then that's going to be something Daryl's going to have to kind of figure out. But I mean, if James comes back, Mark, you still have a chance. It's just about, can Joel stay healthy, and can James and Joe show up in the big moments?
I don't think I asked you point blank. Do you think James Harden is back next year?
No.
Okay.
I just don't think he is.
Okay. All right.
But just reading the tea leaves, Mark, we have been hearing this Harden to Houston stuff since Christmas. Mm-hmm. And on that Christmas day after that game in New York, I asked James, what about these reports? Literally after that game. He brushed it off.
I don't know where those reports came from, Ky.
Yep.
You mean like, Woj has no credibility, of course. But right.
So exactly. It wasn't exactly like a huge deny. You know what I mean? And like it wasn't just Christmas Day either. It was just constantly continuing to pop up throughout the season. Even in round 1 against Brooklyn, a report came out that he still wants to go to Houston. So we have been hearing these, where there's smoke, there's fire. And there has been smoke bellowing since Christmas.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, finish that thought. Sorry.
I was just going to say it looks like, he's heading back to Houston. Just everything kind of says that he will be heading back.
So from the people I've talked to, it sounds like you and I are closest to being on the same page, which is you're not necessarily, because I don't think Harden's back either. You're not necessarily shoving Joel Embiid out the door. You're not calling around the league right now to be like, I'm unloading him. What are you going to give me? It's not like that, but You're a little bit closer to fielding as many of those calls as possible when it comes to Joel Embiid and the potential of blowing it up.
Yeah, you have to at least consider it. I wouldn't yet. I really wouldn't, because Joel is the MVP of the league. You don't just unload a guy like that unless you get, I can't believe I'm about to say this, a Rudy Gobert type haul.
Right.
Which I can't believe. I still can't believe the Jazz gave Gobert that much money. I still
4 first rounders. Good Lord.
Still can't believe that. But I still can't believe the Jazz got that type of haul. And anyway, like unless you're going to get that type of haul for Joel, I wouldn't do it. I mean, you continue to kind of rock with Joel and Tyrese. I mean, just the D'Antoni stuff. And again, that's not like a source thing. It's just an opinion. I do believe that Daryl will go after, try and bring Mike here. I really do believe that, because if you remember, Mark, when the Sixers traded for Harden, Mark Stein actually put out a report that the Sixers were actually thinking about maybe firing Doc and replacing him with D'Antoni that season.
Oh yeah. So,
and I mean, like Mark Stein is as plugged in as anybody else in the league. So
that is interesting, man. So let's end on something that might be optimistic here. All right, let's do an impression of somebody who's really optimistic. You and I here, okay?
All right.
So we watch the Nuggets with this great run that they're on in the finals and all that jazz. Okay, no pun intended. But you look at it like this: can Tyrese Maxey be the Jamal Murray to Embiid as Jamal Murray is to Nikola Jokic?
Again, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Here's the optimistic part of it. Here's what I will say.
Okay.
I've talked a lot about Jalen Hurts, right? As everyone has pretty much, in terms of Jalen Hurts making these huge steps in progression. I've never seen anybody go from the way he was this one year to then boom, the next year he was MVP caliber type of guy.
Yeah.
The way that Tyrese Maxey, and granted he had more of a ceiling, he had a higher ceiling because Simmons was gone. But from year 1 to year 2, it was a huge jump. And then year 2, year 3, as far as being a starter in this lineup and being a guy that you can start depending on in this lineup for the Sixers on this roster, he has taken some pretty big steps forward. So if Harden's not here, and it is Tyrese Maxey getting more minutes and getting more opportunities, and it is more of a, I don't know what you would call it, there's 2 kings, so to speak, being able to score the basketball, I'm curious to see whether or not he can take another big leap forward as he did when Ben Simmons moved on, or the Sixers moved on from Ben Simmons.
So here's the counterpoint to that.
Ah, damn it.
As terrific as Maxey, I agree with you. Maxey continues to just move forward. He's been one impressive young kid.
I was just hoping you'd tell me that's a brilliant point and just be excited with you. But okay.
No. Like, listen, I always gotta have a counter.
No, you're right. Go ahead.
Speaking of counters, I don't think he has a counter move. So on the offensive end, he's got one move. It's either that straight line drive to the basket or that step. Okay, 2 moves. Or that straight line drive to the basket or that step back 3. That's all he's got.
Okay.
So when you face a team like the Celtics, who have legitimate defenders, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford, Robert Williams at the rim, and if you're not able to get that initial shot off, where's your counter move? Where is it?
You want to see a little fadeaway? You want to see a little fadeaway, Tyrese Maxey?
Something, because Jamal Murray's got a counter. Jamal Murray's got plenty of counters. So and that's what kind of has helped him become that perimeter scorer that the Nuggets have needed. next to Joker. And then they got shooters: Michael Porter Jr., Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Bruce Brown, Aaron Gordon. They've all kind of morphed into really good players there. So I just don't think Maxey has that counter move yet. But then again, you just mentioned he always takes those leaps. Let's see what he's got next year.
All right, maybe that'll be the hint that Sam Cassell will get the next head coaching gig. Him and Maxey will be in the gym all off season, working on some fadeaway, some other kind of step back, some other kind of crossover, whatever it might be. Maybe that'll be the deal.
Spin move, something.
Ky, you do wonderful work, of course, for Sixers Wire USA Today, and keep those people hustling around the region when it comes to the NBA Wire as an editor there also, my friend. Ky, great catching up with you. I hope you get to enjoy a nice offseason that won't be too action-packed with too much news, but enough to keep you busy, of course.
Oh, of course. We like to find a balance there. I like that.
Ky Carlin joining us from Sixers Wire of USA Today. Ky, thanks, man.
Hey, appreciate you, Mark. Thank you.